What ML5s are the most likely to be buffed? Well, let's take a look at that. Okay, so, even though she's not played very much, I think it's kind of unlikely. Oops, sorry. Kind of unlikely they would buff Yuffie. She ran over the meta for like an entire year. Now she gets a little bit of downtime, and she's still very usable. Ainz really, really needs a buff, but it's, it would really be an unlikely, because the only way Ainz is getting a buff is if they rerun a Overlord collab, right? He needs it, but it's unlikely because it would require an Overlord rerun. Now, you could say, well, it's been about a year. No, it's been about 6 months. 7 months. It's not been about a year. And, I don't know. He's a free unit, he won't get buffed. I don't know about that. I think if they reran Overlord, they would buff him. They would at least give him an EE. I think they would. But anyway, an Overlord rerun's unlikely in the near future. Maybe in the spring or summer, maybe, right? Taiwan, I mean, if they buff this guy, what the fuck, Smilegate? It's the strongest unit in the game. APOC, I think it's kind of unlikely because she was so unstoppable. They threw everything and the kitchen sink. The whole reason the monstrosity named Hua Young existed was to try to deal with APOC Ravi, and ironically Hua Young killed everything except APOC Ravi, but I don't think they want to touch this unit who was such a problem for them for like an entire year. Finally gotten to the point where she's not running over everything, and the reason she's not running over everything is because Blood Moon Haste is just basically an upgrade. Another what the fuck Smilegate. Strongest ass unit in the game. Well, not strongest, but one of the strongest? I don't think so. I don't think there's any way that they buff Arby. He's back in the meta. Archdemon Shadow is actually kind of likely. In fact, I don't know. What do you guys think? I think she's kind of likely, because she's still somewhat usable. I'll have to think about this, right? The only reason I'm not putting her in most likely is there isn't a huge public outcry asking people to, or asking Smilegate for her to be buffed. Architect Leica is probably pretty likely. Her and Strays are in kind of a bad place right now, so I think they might find ways to buff them up, but, you know, they're still usable, but not as much. Astromancer Lena, I think, is most likely because her kit is just eclipsed by an RGB unit, and it's really weird for an RGB unit to be substantially better than an ML5 unit. Bellion, please, Smilegate. Don't. Just don't. Just leave her alone. Same with Bryce Area. These are all top tier units. Loser Charles has got a really, really good chance getting buffed. He is only really used in an A13 one-shot, and that's pretty much it. Commander Pavel, though unlikely, I think he's possible. Conqueror Lilius, there's no shot. Dark Corvus is pretty unlikely. He's still heavily used in Guild Wars. Of course, they're obviously going to buff DDR. Why wouldn't they buff DDR? The guy really needs a little something, right? I mean, Schneel's going to come out and completely remove him from the game. Of course, they're going to have to buff him to deal with that, or else he's just not going to be usable, right? If you guys think Schneel is making this unit not playable, you're crazy. DJ Basar actually, I don't know, in a debuff meta heavy, he's still really good, but kind of hard. They might buff Desert Jewel just to kind of help us deal with the debuff heavy meta we're in right now. And when I say buff, I'm not just talking about balance patch buffs, I'm talking about also EEs, right? Exclusive equipments, a little bit of a nudge, some kind of a nudge to take them up. Designer Lilibet is insane right now. People asking if I need to redo my tier list to move Death Dealer Ray down because of Schneel. I'm like, no, the only thing I think I might need to do on my tier list is move Lilibet up. But right now, I'm still pretty happy with my tier list. Absolutely no shot that gets buffed. Absolutely no shot that this gets buffed. Yeah, I think that's fine. No way. Very unlikely. Very unlikely. She should be here, kind of likely, but the community outrage has been demanding her. Every time they post a balance patch, the first comment, where's FCC? And it's kind of crazy, right? Because FCC is really good at her job. It's just other units are better at her job. But it's the same situation that Astromancer Elena has, right? There are RGB units that are better at her job than she is, in basically Mort. Whereas Fallen Cecilia has got lots of units that are better than her job, and a lot of them are 3 stars. So that's kind of rough. She used to be a great disaster in the game. She used to be the unit you needed to have if you wanted to compete. And I'm scared to death about how slow and tanky this meta is and what a buff to FCC could mean. I think a buff to FCC is exactly what this game does not need. But I think she's very, very likely because she's the most commonly asked for buffed. I think people asking for this buff are the same kind of people that were excited about the Ruel buff and thought that that would be good for the game. What does she do? She is a very, very, very tanky knight who can carry mitigation in the form of Arius or Adamant. She spams barriers on S3. She spams skill nulls. And she's got 100% provoke on her S1, and she can be built for DPS. And every single one of those things is done better by other units. We got other units that do barriers better. We got other units that do the damage night gig better. We got other units that do the mitigation night gig better. Got other units whose tankiness eclipses hers. I think the best thing they could do for FCC isn't just power creeper up, isn't just like, well, now her barriers are this big and now the skill null lasts 2 rounds or anything like that. I think the best thing they could do for FCC would be to add something to her kit that makes her different. Look at Last Rider Crow, right? Last Rider Crow was in the same boat as Fallen Cecilia. He was a mitigation knight who could also do some damage. But why would you pick that over, all these other mitigation knights that also did damage? Like, I don't know, Navy Captain Landy, for example. So they gave him something to his kit other knights didn't have, and suddenly he's very usable again. Surely they buff Harsetti. Nobody plays this unit. Ugh. Everybody says Lua's going to get a buff. Lua's going to get a buff. Here's the thing about Lua. Lua's sold really, really well. The only time Smilegate does an emergency buff on a unit that's not performing well is when the performance is in the sales, not in the playability, right? Architect Leica got a buff during her banner because she was not selling well. People weren't pulling for her, so they had to buff her so that people would pull for her. The same with Edward Elric. Edward Elric's kit was so bad, nobody was pulling for him, and I'm sure FMA reached out and said, hey, our main character is not making us much money. You guys got to go in there and fix that. So, same with ML Quaric. I believe did his buff come out while his banner was up? Can't quite remember. I thought his buff was after his banner. Regardless, they will emergency buff a unit when people aren't buying it. Everybody went in on Lua. Yeah, the leg handcuffs did it. That's all it took. People went nuts for her, so she sold really, really well. So there's no motivation to buff her during her banner. She will get buffed months down the road, and then they'll rerun her banner. The double dip. It's just business 101. So it's very unlikely she will get a buff, even though she kind of needs one. It's too soon. It's too early. Very, very unlikely they'll buff Judge Kise again. In fact, I'm going to put it down here because she's already really, really strong. Lionheart Sermia, pretty unlikely. Little Queen Charlotte, I think even though she is very, very good in the game, I think it's kind of likely because she's still eclipsed by a free 3-star unit. there are, you know, the extinction is about the only thing she does better than Savior Auden, and it's arguable. She can be built with a little more damage, but dead is dead, and giving your entire team a gold shield, having the clap back and stuff, it kind of eclipses the mitigation. Smilegate really overestimates the power of extinction. They've only ever made one really good single target extinction unit, and that's the Says and Specimen Says, and look how hard they are to play as well. Lone Crescent Bologna, very, very unlikely she will get touched. Maid Chloe, you know, they just bumped Ruel. And we're in a debuff heavy meta. I don't think they will. I don't think they will, just because of how much she slows down the fighting, and they like to keep this seesaw action of we go from a tank down meta to an aggro meta, back to a tank down meta, back to an aggro meta, and then, you know, Cleave and Standard gets stronger depending on how they swing that pendulum. ML Ken, they actually might give Ken a little something to make him not suck into Illinov so much. There's no way they touch Kowarik. There's no way they touch Landy. There's no way they touch Luna. You know what? I'm not going to say there's no way they touch Landy. I just think it's going to be unlikely. Like Abyssal Euphine, she ruled the waves for so long that they aren't going to steer us back into that so quickly. She needs a little downtime. Operator Cigarette, I think, is the one who needs it the most. I still think FCC is the most likely, but Operator Cigarette needs it the most. She is hands down the worst ML5 in the game right now. Although Pirate Captain Flan needs it the most, really, really short-sighted people convince Smilegate to dial up her buffs back. So I'm going to put her down here in kinda likely. I think we would probably never see a Flan buff. I think it would probably be over a year before we would see Flan buff. The only reason I think she might get buffed, she might get touched in a different way, is because she is the ML that's getting a skin from RTA this season, and it's just gonna feel really bad getting an RTA skin for an unusable C tier unit. So I think they might do something for her. I don't think it's gonna be the last buffs. Smilegate's really big on when they make a hard public decision, they don't roll it back unless there's like trucks and things like that, and they already kind of rolled back her buffs. They aren't going to roll back the rollback. It would make them look wishy-washy and like they don't know what they're doing. So I think they will touch her, but in a different way. We aren't going to see her old kit. We're going to see something different for Pirate Captain Flan, just to go with the skin. So you know what? I'm going to put her up here in the most likely, just simply because of the RTA skin. If it wasn't for the RTA skin, I would say it's unlikely, because of the way Smilegate works without, you know, not undoing what they've already done. But because we have an RTA skin, I think it's likely we will see her buffed, just so that people aren't unhappy with the skin. A lot of people think Remnant Violet is just needs 100% evasion, and I think those people need to take a long, hard look in the mirror and think, do we really need a second Flan? Do we need a second Flan that synergizes with first Flan? I think 100% evasion on him would make him very, very meta, and it would be just diabolically awful unless we get a lot more things that penetrate evasion. So yeah, that would be scary to turn God into a vengeful God. So I don't think he will get touched that way, but I do think Violet needs a buff. I think he needs a little something something. I think it's not unlikely. Requiem Rowana is really freaking good. There's no way. Ruel, surely they don't buff Ruel anymore. Please never buff Ruel again. Sage Ball is still really good anti-cleave. He could use a buff to be usable in this meta a little bit more, but I don't think he's going to get one. Sea Phantom Poly, one of the best units in the game. They just buffed her. There's no way they do it again. Very unlikely they touch Solitaria. I guess there's an outside possibility they do a little bit of something for her to make her a little bit better after you've dealt with Flan, but her kit's an Evergreen kit, so I don't think they'll touch her. Specimen Says has already been buffed recently. They just gave Spectre Tenebria an EE. She's still the queen of PvE. Her RTA uses are gone pretty much, but I don't think they'll touch her. Not with her being at the top of the tier for I don't know, since her original buff in 2019, she's been the top of the tier. What is Evergreen? You know how there's two kinds of trees, right? The ones that drop leaves, and then there's Evergreen trees. They're green all year round. So that's kind of a gamer term for, not even a gamer, it's a business term, for things that are always going to be good. No matter what happens in the meta, no matter how things change or shift, this unit's going to be usable. This unit's still going to have its leaves and overcome. So when you hear somebody say a unit's an evergreen unit, usually we're talking about units that will always have a place in the meta. As long as Tag's book exists, Bellion will always have a place in the meta because she turns souls off. She's an evergreen unit. Spectre Tenebria lets you climb through all the levels of Abyss. She's always going to have a place in the game. That's basically it. Zeo's the same thing. Zeo, a unit who ignores speed, can always go first. In a way, they make Zeo better. Spirit Eye Celine. I don't know. I think she could use a little something something. But I don't know if she'll get it. Not a lot of people are asking for it. Twisted Idol on Charon. He kind of needs one, but it's unlikely they would buff him immediately after the patch where they just buffed him, right? Sylvan Sage Vivian, very unlikely. She's still giga powerful. Top model Lulika is unlikely because she is really good at high end of play, but she's not accessible. I would say 95% of the player base can't build this unit. I think, if anything, she's likely to get an EE. If she gets a speed EE, she's going to be freaking everywhere. All right, speed, main stat EE, she'll be everywhere. And there's no way they buff Shu, right? Okay. I think that's it. Now, this in no way implies these units are getting buffs or that I have any kind of insider knowledge. This is just kind of going over it and looking at this list. I think these are the ones that need a buff. Or an EE, right? There you go. Anybody disagree? What do you guys think? Think Strays is in the same boat as Stenny? Don't I have Strays in the same boat as Stenny? Oh, Strays. I don't know. Stenny is usable in tons of PvE. Tons of PvE. Strays and Leica aren't. I mean, you can build a Strays that can one-shot just about any hunt, but if you can build that Strays, why aren't you farming Rift? No, nobody. And with quick battles and background battles, especially with quick battles, nobody's really doing the Strays one-shots anymore. The only Strays one-shots that still exist is the A13 Strays one-shot. Is A-Ravi still viable in RTA? Yes, very much so. She always pops out in the last few weeks. She is a stable bruiser unit, and if haste isn't an option, and you're sitting there stun locked and you can't figure out what to draft, and you're watching that timer tick down and you don't know what to do, slam APOC Ravi. She still carries in a lot of fights. Ignore pen resistance. Yeah, I think ignore pen resistance is a word you're going to see come out on a lot of exclusive equipments and units in the near future. Alright guys, let me know what you think about this in the comments section, and don't forget to like and subscribe.